You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Somebody contacted me a few years ago and said, Randy, it's good to see you're doing what you wanted. And I said, what was that? He said, you were going to travel the world, collect your ingredients, and start a restaurant. So that's where the Asian influence comes to. And, you know, I love spice. I love flavor. For me, going into India and going into other kitchens around the world, food is community. If you can speak the language of food, you can get by in the kitchen. People were like, how did you work in India? So in India, I was in charge. So a lot of flailing the arms, a lot of tasting, a lot of, you know, and I learned the language. And when I'm in other countries, when you can talk about food and taste and everybody loves food and it is a community. And so to bring that alive, it's finding that common denominator that we all love, and especially when you're talking to chefs or restaurateurs. I think every kitchen around the world is pretty much the same, but maybe different utensils.
My guest this week is one for foodies and especially for all lovers of ethnic street foods, as my guest is Randy Lewis from the famous Randaddys restaurant on the seafront in Lahinch, County Clare. Randy has travelled and worked all over the world over the last 20 years. He shares great insights into the food business, and he talks about his great travels all around the world and especially about his time working in India. It's going to be a bit of an India special this week. We also talk about Randy's upcoming video series coming out in May on YouTube, and I'd recommend you to subscribe to Randaddy's YouTube channel to see every episode coming soon. Randy, you're very welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Thanks very much for having me. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Do you know what? When I see you, I associate Randaddys, the famous restaurant in Lahinch. I associate you with pancakes in the morning time after a big night out in Lahinch. I always end up having breakfast and having lovely American style pancakes with you. So the restaurant is right on the waterfront there in Lahinch. People know it very well. Very famous.
Yeah, it's definitely very famous. It's come along over the last 10 years. We've definitely came in leaps and bounds, you know, from a 40-seater to now a 200-seater with a patio overlooking the Atlantic, it's fabulous, you know.
And how long have you been there?
10 years. It'll be 10 years.
And your accent, obviously, you're not Irish. So where are you from?
From Canada, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
And how long are you in Ireland?
I've been in Ireland for about 15 years on and off, since 2005. In the middle of that, I had a bit of adventure excursion for 2 years around Asia and working and living around Asia, and more importantly, India.
And was it love that brought you to Ireland, or what was it? How did you end up here?
I think just traveling through the world. I mean, visas were quite easy for Canadians to get. I had some amazing Irish friends that I had met in Australia. And, you know, I met them in 2001. So it was 2004 and I had talked to them and I was ready to go on more journeys around the world. And I had gotten visas for Ireland and England. And I just decided to come over to Ireland, and one thing led to another, and I bypassed my English visa. Wow. And, you know, everything kind of, you know, I've worked very hard in the time I was here, and got some really good job opportunities. And I just ended up staying, and I actually bought a house in the second year I was in Ireland. I bought a house in Ennistimon, just near Lahinch.
Can you tell me about your project? You've got an exciting project planned for this year, don't you?
Yeah, it's planned and done and dusted. So, you know, you're really going to have to watch, but I'll give you an outline where it's a travel adventure, 20 counties, 20 days, hitting amazing food producers, hitting amazing adventure activities, hitting 20 counties, doing our own map around places that people could stop, lovely viewpoints and everything, and trying we have 35 food suppliers that we've tried and sourced, and really unique flavors to Ireland. You're really just going to have to watch and look at the videos when they come out.
Brilliant. Yeah. I love your videos. They're great.
Do you watch some of them?
I've been watching them for years.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Like you were I watched them through Facebook. So you were in Cuba, I think, and weren't you in Hong Kong, weren't you? Am I right?
Yeah. 6 years ago, I think. Yeah. 6 years ago.
Yeah. They're brilliant.
So That's the exciting part, is people like you know that the next video is coming up. It's not just it's a once-off. It's something I guess I've been plowing at for years. I've been documenting it for 6 years, but doing it for 20 years, you know. And that's important to me, that people know that I'm not I guess you could say a fraud. It's something I've been doing before I was a chef, or before I became a good chef or a restaurant owner, rather than doing the whole, you know, thing backwards, I guess, in my terms, where they, you know, they do their cooking show, and they're like, oh, where can we go?
So what was it like? Did you feel, is Ireland, I always find when I was traveling that Irish and Canadians, I'd often end up teaming up with Canadians because we're quite similar, aren't we?
Yeah, it's very easy to travel. We're fairly relaxed when it comes to traveling. I think our cultures are relaxed. I think more importantly, we like the same beer. So I mean, with all those combined, you know, and the fun, loving nature of being relaxed, I definitely think it's very easy and very well for our cultures to be combined.
Did you travel with a Canadian flag on your bag?
No, I didn't. I didn't actually. I wasn't one of those. But just for the fact was there were so many of them doing it, I kind of like doing the opposite of the crowd. Hence Randaddy's Lahinch, you know.
And so you always been chefing then? Was it like when you started traveling, like were you already a chef at that stage, or was that something that happened through your travels?
Yeah, well, I started cooking from a very young age. Really, to be truly honest with you, I swear on my life, I was cooking when I was probably 7 years old, through cookbooks, and making muffins, more importantly, or making, you know, food, you know, like easy things like putting tortillas down and putting sauce and cheese on them and put them in the oven with, I just love cheese. So I'd be putting loads of cheese on, you know, you know, from making French toast to pancakes to chocolate muffins. And, you know, and that was definitely a passion. I remember somebody teaching me, you know, an older fella who was actually dorming with my mother, and him saying he was on a cooking program and we were making muffins, and he was putting coating the raisins in flour so they wouldn't sink to the bottom, and they'd hold more buoyancy in the muffins. It's amazing that story has just come to me right now. But lots of influential people in my life, and food has always been very easy for me, and knowing flavors. Even as long ago when I was younger, melting cheese on a plate in a microwave and forming it around a cup, you know, and just eating it like that way. And then later on in my career, realizing that people are actually making cheese cups and putting salads in them, you know. Not that I was definitely not, I was innovative in my own right, you know, as a young, and I just like to do things and create things. And I remember my mom finding cake mixes underneath my bed, because I'd be making cake mixes and the dog would get at it. And, you know, so, you know, it evolved there. And then it went into, you know, summer camps. I was going to summer camps, and eventually I went from being a camper and a camp counselor to washing dishes in the summer camp, to learning a few bits and pieces and thinking I really like this thing, to, you know, going to learn at a pizzeria, and then going to look at, you know, then I was a waiter for a small amount of time and a bartender, and then going really streamlining into food, you know, throughout that. And so I've always been around the food industry, I'd say, since I was about 13 was my first job. 14 was the pizzeria job. So that's, you know, a summer camp to there, you know, it's been quite a while. So, and then it just continued on, and traveling around the world was my goal. I mean, I was 17 when my first travel adventure started, and that was from Canada, Edmonton, Alberta. We took a road trip all the way down to as far as Huntington Beach in LA. Wow. So it was a massive road trip for 3 weeks. And after that, I was just like, this is, I've always wanted to explore, since I was younger. And more importantly, everybody said I couldn't do it, or wasn't going to do it, you know? Yeah. So I love that driving factor.
One I've noticed from you, from stuff that you do up, like little videos on YouTube and stuff, that you have a big Asian influence in your food. So were you over in Asia for a while? Did you work over in Asia?
I think, firstly, coming from Canada, it's so multiculturalized. So I come from a city of 1 million. And in that million, there's 200,000 Chinese. You know, there's probably 50,000 Lebanese. There is, you know, another 100,000 Filipinos. Okay. You know, there's a big, massive influence from Asia, you know, because, I mean, and Indians for that matter, you know. So, I mean, for food varieties in Canada and experiencing food and learning food, you're really subjected to a lot of food cultures. So, first of all, I've loved Mexican food, or I've loved all those spicy kind of foods. And I mean, I guess it's only the European countries that wouldn't really have much spice in their food normally, you know. So going down to it, yeah, I spent 2 years living and traveling in Asia. So when recession came in, I had an opportunity to work in India and actually, not for volunteer, actually work and make rupees. So I was working and living in India for almost 2 years.
Wow.
So that gave me an amazing base to start really traveling into Thailand and doing. So when I had vacations in India, I would go to Thailand and I would work for free. A lot of my times, I'd pull up to a hotel. I'd ask them for free accommodation if I could work in their kitchen. And that's how I was doing things when I was traveling the world, even when I went through other places in the world. And so then obviously being there, working and I guess working at stages, they call them, in Hong Kong, throughout working with the best chefs in Hong Kong and around Asia, has definitely enlightened me to different flavors. And more importantly, I worked at the Vancouver Hyatt Regency, and that was full of, basically in that kitchen, I was 22 working there, and in this kitchen of about a 35 to 40 brigade, they called me CK, and that meant Canadian kid. So I was surrounded by Asians and, more importantly, Indians. So from then on, I got amazing base on food and always said what I was going to do. I actually forecasted what we're doing now, believe it or not. Somebody contacted me a few years ago, said, Randy, it's good to see you're doing what you wanted. And I said, what was that? He said, you were going to travel the world, collect your ingredients, and start a restaurant. So it's funny. I mean, people forecasting things and talk about it all the time and writing it down. That's what I'm constantly doing in my brain. So that's where the Asian influence comes to. And, I love spice. I love flavor. I really I think it's quite a bit more modern. I think French cuisine, in fact, is great cuisine. And it is actually the base, I find, to a lot of cooking. In fact, most cooking around the world, French base is in there somewhere. Or maybe a French suburb of the base. But I love flavor. French cuisine, I wouldn't say is dying, but people are enlightening themselves to more worldly cuisines. I think the new up and rising cuisine is definitely African cuisine.
Is it?
And I believe so. I don't think it's hit Ireland yet. It's definitely hit a lot of other
African,
places.
Does it have a certain, when you say Italian or French or Indian, you kind of have a bit of an idea in your head. So African, is it more?
African is very, it's dominated by Chinese and India. India, they were over there. I mean, as far as I know, when I did my travels through Kenya, and I did a lot of research, and Moroccan food. I mean, Moroccan is actually a little bit further now, but over on the, we'll say, east coast of Africa, it's definitely dominated by, we'll just label it right now, Indian spices. Now, they could be spices from other parts of Asia. I'll label it Indian spices. So idea, I'd be going into Kenya, and we went to a street food place and they were making biryani. Biryani was their street food, and that was stuff they knew. When I got into people's houses, we were cooking with a lot of Indian influence, or Chinese influence for that matter. Samosas, I don't know where they originated, but, samosas would be a staple dish in Kenya. So if it goes in Kenya, it will, like every food cuisine, it'll trickle down that coast there. Yeah, I'm getting hungry.
I know, yeah. And so you mentioned India there. Where in India were you? 2 years in India. That's a long time.
2 years in India. So working wise, I worked in a place called Pune. It's near Bombay or Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about 3 hours away from Mumbai, and still holds 7 million people.
Wow.
And then I worked in a place called Coimbatore. That was my second place I worked for. And that was more of a textile industry. They had a group of 7. I think they have 14 hotels now. And my job was, believe it or not, the corporate food and beverage manager is what they titled me. My job was to go around and kind of just bring some Western influences in, and Western style into the food, and maybe into a bit of the service, not so much, but more so the background food, and stabilize. You wouldn't believe it, stabilizing their own Indian dishes and creating more formats inside the kitchens, was definitely a job of mine. Now, I wouldn't know Indian flavors, obviously not, but obviously I've learned them. I know a good biryani. I know a good, butter chicken. I know good food. So My first job in India was actually looking after a super restaurant that was a 500 seater. It was overlooking the whole city of Pune, and there was a big Italian restaurant with a Punjabi restaurant. So I was over top of all of them.
What was India like? Like, did you like it working there? Did you like the people?
The people were fabulous. I didn't find it scary at all. I definitely think it's a different culture. Obviously, my best travel experiences were throughout India.
Really?
I had a hard time coping with maybe some of the way the cultural differences are when it came to a working scenario. As a culture, it was obviously there was differences. I'm European, Canadian. We're used to different aspects of our life. As a culture and as people and as being friendly and traveling, awesome. I can't wait to bring my son there. I say when he's the age of, I'd say 8 or 9, we are going there. As soon as he's able to travel, we're going everywhere. He's my new travel companion. I can't wait.
I can relate to that. And tell us, you mentioned there about working in the kitchen. Like, is there a difference in, you've been in Asia, or like, I'd say Hong Kong, you've been into India, you've been in Europe, in Americas, the kitchens. Is there a different culture working in the kitchens, or is it the same the world over? The structure?
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, I feel I've been a lot of continents in the world, even North or South America. And I think for me, going into India and going into other kitchens around the world, food is community. If you could speak the language of food, you can get by in the kitchen. People are like, how did you work in India? So in India, I was in charge. So a lot of flailing the arms, a lot of tasting, a lot of, and I learned the language. And when I'm in other countries, when you could talk about food and taste and everybody loves food and it is a community. And so to bring that alive when you're meeting people and you're trying to walk my way into a kitchen around the world like I do is extremely easy for me because I love food, and it's finding that common denominator that we all love, and especially when you're talking to chefs or restaurateurs. I'm excited all the time about food and when I see different experiences. So, I think every kitchen around the world is pretty much the same, but maybe different utensils.
And when you're traveling, then do you find, busman's holiday? Like, are you always able to just relax when you're on holidays and just chill? Or are you always watching what the cooking, what the kitchen, what's going on?
Well, lately, believe it or not, I haven't really had any holidays besides this past October. I did sneak away. I went to Portugal.
Wow, lovely.
I did sneak away, and that's the first actual holiday I had without a camera in, I'd say, 4 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, sometimes, it gets intense where you're kind of working like, it's a working holiday. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that is actually done, So, I mean, I guess going back to the question, when I am on holidays, I try and relax a bit, and I am relaxed. A lot of my holiday vacations, there's no script to them at all or anything like that. It's very improv. So I'm very relaxed when it comes to that. It's not tense. But when I am on holidays, food is my love. Food is my passion. Having beers are my passion. Tasting wines, tasting alcohols, eating all the time. I'm trying to lose weight, but it's, I do go to the gym. I do eat healthy when I know my ingredients, but it's extremely hard. It's trying to find that balance. But I mean, I can't think of too many great chefs around the world that are extremely, like, I think I'm fit. I mean, I can do a lot of good fitness. I can run for 5 o'clock. I can do all that stuff, but I can't trim the belly. But yeah, so on vacations, I am able to relax a bit, here and there.
Is food important then if you're going to go away? Like, can you go somewhere and the food is grand? I mean, as I said, I heard an interview with Rick Steen, the chef, and he was saying he wouldn't go anywhere. That was the first thing, was the food was the most important thing.
I'm a believer of, I think I gotta be honest with you, he's actually one of my favorite chefs. I don't know much about him, but just his aura. But so going back to it, food is extremely important. I won't lie to you. The center of Kenya, the food was not to die for. When you went to the coast, it was good. So I wouldn't necessarily it wouldn't be my first thought when I'm traveling. I mean, I guess I find most cultures have food in their country that you're going to like anyways. And I'm a big believer on, obviously there is crap food. You just don't pick crap restaurants.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe,
What's your
every
trick
country
for that?
has
So, do you have a trick for looking for restaurants when you go traveling as a
a
restaurateur?
trick. Well, they always say to go to the restaurant that has loads of people coming out of it. And I mean, that's a good trick that I'd be using. I mean, I do like a lot of street food. I do, if I'm in the country and they have a takeaway and I see it's busy, I will get their own country style takeaway because, usually if you're getting a takeaway curry and that place is busy, well, that's going to be a whopping curry. So I would say that could be a bit of a trick of mine. Seeing the food cooked in front of me is always important, and a lot of places around the world are cooking food in front of you. Now, when you're going around Europe, it's a bit different. Using TripAdvisor, I think, could be a massive skewer. I'm not a big fan of it. I kind of take it as a base. I definitely take it as a base and usually read through things quite swiftly. I wouldn't take the highest stars ones. I definitely wouldn't. Obviously, owning a restaurant, I kind of see what goes on, I feel. But I definitely try and punch around the middle. I ask around. I ask the staff, I'll ask 2 or 3 staff members definitely of where I'm staying before I'll make my judgment call. And then after that, once I do find a place, I generally eat it 2 or 3 times and go through the menu. And that's kind of a safe bet that I like to use.
I was in India, actually. You just reminded me when you're describing it there. I was in India for 6 weeks and eating street food, and it was cooked in front of you off the side of the road and delicious. And then once I went in Udaipur, that famous hotel in the middle of the lake, 5-star hotel. We went over there and I had like afternoon tea with sandwiches and bloody lettuce in it. And then I was sick as a dog for months afterwards. And that's the thing. And that was in the 5-star hotel,
Yeah, I can believe that though.
You never get sick. The street food is being cooked in front of you and people are eating for it. Generally, you're pretty safe.
I think so. And definitely from living in India. So the way they do it in India is everything is killed that day. Well, the way the majority of places do it in India, everything is killed that day and cooked that day. So, I mean, it's fairly safe. I mean, I've seen chicken the way they came to the restaurant I was at. Now I stopped it after a while. They'd be coming with a potato sack of chicken, coming in, drop it on the ground. They'd be tossing it, and it's killed that day. And I mean, killed that day, cooked in front of you, you're not going too far wrong and looking at the big lines, So yeah, I totally agree with you. I would prefer to do that than go into the fine looking place that only has, 10 tables going for it, Yeah.
And tell us, so you've been all over the world to many great restaurants. Is there one that sticks out or one or two that you remember particularly great meal?
Well, I think countries stick out to me more than actual restaurants, and eating, pho soup in Thailand on the street vendors. There's definitely a street vendor that sticks out for me in Thailand. There was a street vendor I'd always go to because some of them have different. They have different flavors of the same dishes.
What I used to love in Bangkok is the street stalls. We'd go back to this place and get a green curry, but we used to get like a kind of a smoothie and it'd be in a little plastic bag with a straw in it,
Yeah.
And it was so
and that
gorgeous.
was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, that sticks out with me a lot more, India as a place to eat. I've definitely eaten at a lot of fine dining restaurants, but I mean, I kind of like the casual restaurants. I find you have a little bit more flavors that I'm in touch with. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I love the fine dining and I love the whole atmosphere around it. Is definitely, but I mean, let's face it, it is very expensive. You can't do it all the time. The last fine dining meal I had was in Portugal, and before that, I can't even remember, I prefer to eat casual diners that I know and looking for flavors that I love.
What's the most unusual thing that you ever ate? You must have had some unusual stuff in Asia.
You try snake or, you try the crickets on the street of Thailand. I'm sure you've seen the buggies going down.
Yeah. I dodged them though.
But I mean, I wouldn't be, I am adventurous, but I'm not adventurous to the point of, trying something I wouldn't, like. I mean, Okay, well, I mean, drinking cow's blood straight from the cow was pretty adventurous, you know.
Yeah.
That was in Kenya.
Wow.
That was definitely by far the craziest experience I've had. Drinking the cow's blood straight from the cow, popping the arrow into it, watching the blood come out. 2 seconds later, switched it around and down it. You know,
And warm.
that was probably the most adventurous. I think that's pretty good, and it's pretty high up there.
And where is there somewhere that you haven't been to that you want to go to?
Loads of places I haven't been to. I mean, I think I haven't counted. I think I'm somewhere up between 40 and 50. There's lots of places around Africa I would like to go. I would like to get into China a bit more. I'd like to go around Eastern Europe a bit more. I'd like to, go around, I guess everywhere a bit more, I mean, there's a lot of countries still left to hit. I'd say Africa is definitely, like, I've been to Morocco in Africa, and I've been to Kenya. So I think Africa is definitely somewhere I'd like to kind of explore a bit more.
What's Morocco like? That's somewhere that's on my bucket list.
Morocco was good. I was on the coast of Morocco for 2.5 weeks, three weeks actually. Fabulous. Got into a couple great kitchens. Got a great documentary video there. I don't know if you've seen it. So I think people wouldn't know, but Morocco is full of olives, and olive oil is fabulous there.
Oh, is it?
Olives
Okay.
and olive oil. It's definitely my favorite ingredients that I learned about Moroccan cooking. They use a lot of black pepper, and obviously cooking in tagines. I mean, the way they do it in tagines, if anybody has a chance to look at the videos, it's incredible. I was in this restaurant, and there was, I would say, 200 tagines cooking at one time, and we were going around and getting them going. It was definitely a unique experience, and cold coming from it, and it's just, you would think that they were getting stuff ready in a pan, put it in tagine, or they cooked it to order, or but no, there was 200 tagines cooking there, and the breads were coming out very fresh, because you get basically, I wouldn't know what the name of it is, but they'd always be fresh bread to go with the tagine, and get the pickled chili into it. My mouth's watering here. It was fabulous. Yeah, definitely flavorful cooking.
The beauty of the country as well. Like it just looks amazing with did you go into Marrakesh?
Yeah, I was in Marrakesh, seeing a lot of weird things, the snake charming and all that stuff. And I didn't stay too long in Marrakesh. It's not too much of a memorable stuff. I don't really like to sit around in cities.
Yeah.
So we went to the market, the couple famous things, and then we headed straight for the coast.
Yeah.
And really we're on the coast, in Tagazout area, surfing and really kind of just relaxing. I was there with my son. I think he was a year at that point, a year and a half, so we were very stable on that one, but definitely going up and down the coast, rented a car, and yeah, it was, we actually rented a car throughout the whole of Morocco.
There's no problem driving there, is there? Driving yourself?
No problem driving around. No problem at all. Just have your documentation is what I'll say.
Okay.
And make sure the documentation you have is real. I don't think ours was. At least the cop was telling us it wasn't, and he obviously thiefed us for 50 euros.
Is he? Wow. Yeah. There's nothing worse, when that happens. Actually, that reminds me. Have you ever had an incident when you're traveling when you were really scared?
I tend to travel with a bit of cash on me, because I'm just a bit paranoid, about cards, because I've always had cards not working in that country. So I can travel with cash now. I was in Ecuador for 3.5 weeks, and I wouldn't say I was scared, but they definitely put the fright in you, where me and my brother were sitting there in Ecuador. I can't remember the city name. It's the number one city that you fly into.
Quito, is it?
Quito, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yeah, you're very good with geography.
It's another
Too much
place.
pot in my older days. No, I'm just joking.
That's another spot on my list. That's why.
Yeah. So we were in Quito having a coffee, sitting there. A fight broke out. There was a crowd around. There was cops around. We watched the cop. There were 2 taxi cab drivers going at it. One of them fell down. The cop picked him up, pushed him back into the fight. And we were like, holy shit, what's going on here? So we were just like, we were, and then they told you don't travel at night when it gets dark. There was cops on every corner, 2 or 3 cops on every corner. So that was quite scary. Brazil, being in Salvador, They told you don't go out of the square area. And in Salvador, there was a square area of maybe 2 square kilometers, I could think. We didn't really, we ventured out a bit for one day. That was in the broad daylight. And, you kept your wits about you. But I think when they say don't travel around outside this area and you see cops or guards on every corner or walking around constantly patrolling, it kind of puts a bit of fright, wondering, why is this happening? There has to be a reason they're spending this money, and there has to be a reason they're saying don't go out of this square vicinity, So those kind of times, and I think I've never really put myself in a position that could have a massive fright where it's like, holy shit, I shouldn't be doing this right now. I think if you walk down the dark alley, you're going to get in trouble.
Do you know what? You've me thinking there. You're right. When you're in South America, that's maybe why when I think of my travels in South America versus Asia, you don't have that in Asia. You know what I mean? You don't quantify it. That just being able to, in Asia, you're walking around, you never feel nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you never feel nervous in Asia. Every smiling face.
So do you have a favorite? I mean, you've obviously been to many, many countries. Does one jump out? A particular country? India, is it?
India, yeah. I mean, India, like, I can't wait to go back. It's just India, Asia, those places are definitely pop out to me. Just, you're obviously going to have the bad apples, but what people don't realize is when you got 1.3 billion people in the country, there's going to be some bad people. When you have that condensed culture, there's going to be some bad people, but they're friendly. But India stands out, where anything can happen in India. I mean, I landed in India. The job I went for, I landed in the country. The guy never answered his phone. So here I am. I quit my job at 60,000 euros a year, to go to India. And I get there and he's like, didn't answer his phone. So I really had to just get my wits about me and say, okay, it's time to go to work here, and time to try and get into this system here and find a job somehow. So it's just an amazing travel experience. If you're white, if you're traveling through India and need to find work, you just put yourself in scenarios. Like, I'd be walking into weddings, and I'd be all of a sudden sitting at a top table with a beard, with my bag. Obviously, I was the white guy, the token white guy, but classic. I love insert myself into scenarios. And India allows you to insert yourself into those scenarios to give you an amazing travel experience, especially if you go off the beaten track, which I love doing. So yeah, I'm really excited to go back to India.
And you're saying, so you found them very welcoming. Is that what you're like?
Yeah, extremely welcoming, maybe for their own benefit. But yeah, extremely welcoming.
Yeah. I experienced that on trains and things where families would come over, they'd take out their food, they'd be having their lunch on the train and they just offer you some,
Yeah, it was by far the most welcoming country, and just wanting to know about you, for me it was, and I think maybe for you then, by the sounds of it, it was definitely one of your top travels,
Oh, definitely. But also, you become, it toughens you because it's so busy, so packed that people can be quite pushy there. Like, for example, I remember one time, booking seats in a 2-person carriage, and then myself and my wife, my girlfriend at the time, Emer, we went into the carriage and there was these 2 old guys in there, one in a kind of an army uniform. And by then we'd become, I would say, like Indians, and we just told them, get out. Whereas there's no way I would have done that in Ireland.
Yeah.
And there was no politeness. I didn't go, sorry now, guys, we booked this. I would just get out. And these were older people that you'd never do that in Ireland. But I felt like I was starting to become a bit Indian. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I didn't like that part, having to do that. But it kind of is necessary there. I'm sure you found that when you were working. You had to order people
there is boundaries, definitely. Yeah. And personal space, 100%, so yeah, there is an extreme of that and there's the other extreme. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. That's part of the culture, I guess. I mean, standing on a train, they are packed and you're like this and you're just trying to,
exactly.
It's, and then they're all the white beady eyes looking at you like you're the first white guy they've ever seen in their life. And you're towering over them probably.
Exactly.
most of them.
I remember my first day or two being there and kind of going, my first surprise was like going into a restaurant and, in Ireland, you go into an Indian restaurant and you essentially have food from the whole continent. Whereas there, you get the food is from that area. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to get a tandoori chicken unless you're in the area.
The first time it's in there. That's funny. No, that actually brings me back to something. The first time in India, one of the scariest times, actually. Here we go. So I'm flying into India, get down. It stinks like shit coming out of the plane. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Sorry if you got to censor that. Yeah. I got off the plane. It was 1 a.m. I had my bags. I had about 1,000 euros on me, which is about 6 months' wages. I had all my bags on me, and I got in a taxi in Mumbai. We're going over this big ass bridge that's a hill, and it's your first time in a country like this so much, and you're seeing all the slums or favelas, or slums is what they call them, and you're seeing people everywhere. It's 1 a.m. You're thinking, this is a country that doesn't sleep. There's people, there's clusters, there's dogs running around everywhere. There's the smells coming. There's traffic coming on you when you're going. So I'm going up this hill. This flipping taxi cuts out, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So it cuts out. There's traffic coming on you. Shoo, 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 shoo. This guy's going backwards. And I'm like, what? I was like, what is going on? And he couldn't speak English. And so we're going backwards, and this traffic's coming on. And then we stop, and everybody starts knocking on the window. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. The first hour of my trip, this is about to go down. So there we go. That was probably a part that scares me. There's a lot of there's a lot of moments like that in travel.
I remember, you've reminded me now, like my first night is practically the same. Like I arrived, myself and Emer, in the middle of the night. We had nothing booked. We had a hotel, or a little hotel booked, but when we went out into the rivals area trying to get a taxi, all these people around us, we went into one taxi, and then when we were driving to the hotel, you had all these tuk-tuks chasing along by the taxi, waving at us. And then eventually we got to the hotel. The tuk-tuk guys got out and went in front of the door of the hotel, which was closed, and started saying, no, closed. No, we bring you to a different place. Yeah. And this is our first night in the middle of the night. And I was roaring at them, get out of my way. And eventually they got out of the way and we got into the hotel. But it was our first experience.
It is mental.
They were literally trying to drag us off somewhere. And I remember the next day, we just sort of pretty much spent the day in bed under the covers, going, not wanting to leave the hotel. And then the next day we left the hotel and went around the blocks. And then the following day we were grand, but it was such a culture shock when you arrive.
I think the culture shock is you're arriving and you have everything that to be yours for the next, 2 or 3 weeks. It's just like, okay, and the next day is like, okay, this is all put away. This is all safe. All it is me walking the streets.
Exactly.
And I think every journey into a third world country is like that. But India was definitely, that was 11 years ago. That was one of the biggest shocks of my life because it was the first third world country I think I guess Ecuador was before that, but the first real, I mean, let's face it, India is known as one of the poorest countries in the world. So it was hardcore. And like you, the first night I was like, oh geez, what did I score myself into? Because I had traveled there first and I met somebody who offered me a job. So I came home and quit my job. So, I mean, and then I think after, you just learn the culture and learn what to do and what to say. And I mean, I was lucky enough that when I lived there, I learned to speak Hinglish, they call it, now I forget it, but I mean, I knew enough to get around and enough to let the tuk-tuk guys know that, or anybody around me know that, okay, he knows the culture. He's an expat that obviously lives here. And so I try and, before I go to countries now, I try and piece together a few words, just, because it just shines a bit of light, try and learn some numbers. Try and learn how much, try and learn, just the very basic 20 words.
Even
if you could do that,
thank you, hello,
if you could do that, it really breaks down a barrier and it kind of opens them up to leaving you alone if that's a problem, Amazing.
And tell us the last question that I ask everybody is, if you close your eyes and take 4 deep breaths, Allow yourself, sorry, I'm going to say it again because I have a croak in my throat. If you close your eyes and take 4 deep breaths, allow yourself to think of your happy place from your travels. Where would that be and why?
I think surfing the beaches of Brazil, in a place called Chicken Town, getting off the beach with the vendors, walking down, giving me a coconut and cooking grilled halloumi cheese on their walk along barbecue that they would have in their hand, and just sitting there and getting margaritas and drinks delivered to me because there was a mini bar on like every 500 meters or 400. There was somebody's unique own personal mini bar. That was an amazing place that I can think of that really brings back memories. I mean, I have a lot of memories around Asia and stuff that I could bring in, but I think that's always been a place where I'd say, you know what, if I ever go, somewhere again that I've always wanted to go, and a place that I'd only say I didn't spend enough time in was that beach right there, where I said I would love to go and just sit on that beach for 2 weeks.
I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.